Welcome to the Rising Tide LinkedIn Live series. If you're listening on Digital Hospitality Feed, every Wednesday, every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. London time. We are here. It's a digital hospitality community, restaurateurs, sales professionals, marketing professionals, technology lovers, founders. We all meet. We have a digital hospitality community that's been growing for the last 3 years, and we want you to join us. So if you're listening, please join us live. If you're down below, thank you for being here. Please invite a friend. Today's topic, we're going to get into podcasting, how to be a better guest on a podcast, how to tell a better story. Jason and I had a long conversation yesterday, and we thought that it would be pertinent to share with our community, since a lot of people in this community are podcasters. A lot of people are getting more opportunity to go on other shows, and we want to share best practices with everybody. Everyone here has some experience, things that they've learned, things that they've messed up, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But today's also Dean LeBay's birthday. Dean LeBay is not here yet. I hope he joins us, but if he listens on replay, Dean LeBay, we love you. We appreciate you. Dean is a special part of this community. And wherever he is, we hope that he gets these messages. Jason Berkowitz, who are you and what are you working on a Friday? Go ahead.
Jason Berkowitz, longtime restaurant operator, partner, founder of Arrow Up Training. We help restaurants build safer and stronger teams, notably turning supervisors into leaders. And on this great Friday, I'm working on the homework of Wednesday to strategically reach out to more people to help sponsor our Essentials Restaurant Training Toolkit that we will be sponsoring, building, and giving away for free to everybody, as well as delivering courses that people have asked for the new work site violence training prevention rule that's coming into effect in California. Now back to you, Sean.
How many reach outs did you do? You promised 5, right?
No, I promised 2, but we
promised 2,
5.
but I stretched it to 5. Did you do 2?
Yeah. Yes, I did too.
Oh, well, there you go. Good man.
I did 3.
Oh, even better. A man of his word. 3. And you still have 2. You still have time on Friday to do those final 2.
If they make sense, but there's a strategy involved. So I'm doing 1 plus beyond that which I expected.
You know what the strategy is, right?
What
would Charlie do? Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. Well, thank you for anybody down below. If you want to join us, please raise your hand. Chris, Helen, Mercedes, Julie, we appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Mandy Graziano on a Friday. Who are you? What are you working on? Take 60 seconds. Go for it.
Well, first, Sean, I love that you're acting as Jason's satellite director of sales, giving him
I'm taking that title. I'm changing my LinkedIn bio. Satellite director of sales. Fantastic.
In public, by the way. In public.
Yes, he's publicly shaming and motivating you all at the same time. It's spectacular. Anyways, Mandy Graziano, author of Sales Tales, The Hustle Humor Lessons of a Life in Sales, a very funny business book that actually helps you be a more strategic salesperson. Sales is my middle name. I run a FaceTime coaching company where I help hospitality sales organizations be more clever in the marketplace, shorten their sales cycle, be better with contracts, and grow your business exponentially behind the screen, in front of the screen, and face to face. So, and I love this podcast conversation. I think having a podcast for 2 years as a host and then as a guest, being on a ton of podcasts, like you can never have too many tips. So I am just jazzed about this conversation today.
Awesome, Mandy. Thank you. Jordan Silverman, 60 seconds. Who are you? What are you working on a Friday?
Happy Friday, everyone. Jordan, CEO and co-founder of Starfish here. Pretty excited for this weekend. Here at Starfish, we are building a restaurant tech platform that helps restaurants, bookkeepers, and other small businesses automate the P&L analysis. So spent a lot of time in the restaurant tech industry. We're really trying to help owners and operators get out of and back of their computer and back into the front of house, operating with their guests, interacting with their team. And I am today really focused. We've got a couple large pilots that we're kicking off this week. So today my big focus is making sure those go well. Happy Friday, everyone. Sean, as always, thanks for hosting.
Appreciate you, Jordan. Thank you. And to anybody that wants to be on the calendar invite, sometimes it's hard to find the LinkedIn room. If you go to Cali Barbecue Media, the link is there. Sometimes it's hard to find. But if you want to find the room easier, quicker, happy to add you to the calendar invite. If you send me your email address, I will add you to the calendar invite. That way you can show up and you can invite a friend. Laura Wilbur, mic is yours, 60 seconds, go for it.
Good morning, I'm Laura Wilbur, and I help restaurant operators get more midweek guests and higher average checks and keep the guests they have by working for a company called Denova Corporate Dining. We run a network of about 23,000 restaurants, and we send our corporate and government clients to them when they're traveling for official company business. There are about 18 million corporate card holders that are dining at these restaurants. And let's see, working on, just like I was on Wednesday, onboarding more restaurants. Have a really special group, fourth generation Mexican concept in San Antonio, La Familia Cortez, that's going live tomorrow. And I'll be going to dine with them next month. I'm going to the Texas Restaurant Association show in San Antonio. Back to you.
Very exciting. Thank you, Laura. Michael Ungaro, mic is yours, 60 seconds. Who are you? What are you working on a Friday? Oh, no, Michael, we can't hear you. Possibly on a desktop, on a mobile phone. Maybe go in the room and come back out. Can anybody else hear Michael, or is it just me?
Got some
there we go.
Internet issues
Now we got you.
going on there, I think.
Now we got you, Michael. Go ahead. You're good.
How about now?
We can hear you. Oh, we could hear you, and then we lost him. We'll get Michael back. Charlie Eblin, mic is yours. Go for it. Charlie Eblin's in the house. We're going to give Riley a chance. Let's see if Riley he's got a mic. Go for it.
My name's Riley Blaisdell. I work for Levitt Group Northwest. I deal with employee benefits, helping organizations design a better plan and reduce their costs for healthcare. And then we also have property and casualty here. So we have teammates that work on that. But the real reason why I stopped by, because I got a bunch of cold calls that I got to do. I just built out a list of calls that I need to knock out. I wanted to stop by and just wish Dean LeBay a happy birthday. I don't see him in the room, but he's a big supporter of this podcast and event and so many people on the platform. So if you get a chance, I recommend dropping him a note, wishing him a happy birthday, because that is one hell of a dude that brings some great passion and energy and is supportive of so many out there.
Appreciate you, Riley. Thank you for saying that. And yes, Dean, it's a happy birthday. We're always thinking about Dean LeBay. Michael, go ahead. Mic is yours.
Hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go for it.
Okay, so Michael Ungaro, CEO, business owner, Kings of Fish TV show, appearing on Amazon Prime in the fall, most likely August, and also the world famous San Pedro Fish Market and Restaurant on the LA waterfront, including some other locations. What do? I'm I guess what people are telling me is I'm a hell of a storyteller. I just didn't realize it all this time. I thought I was just boring people. So if you want to learn more about us, you can watch the show on kingsoffishtv.com. It'll tell you all about our family and what we do. And
oh, we lost you again, Michael.
founded by my grandfather.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah, I'm a third generation in the family, going on fourth generation, and it was founded by my grandfather in 1956.
It's awesome. Thank you, Michael. Anybody down below that wants to join us, please come up on stage, raise your hand. It's always better when we have more voices. Today's topic is how to be a better guest on a podcast. How to be a better guest on a podcast. Jason, can you set the stage and talk a little bit about our personal conversation that we had yesterday?
Well, let's even talk
And this
It
isn't me
was
publicly shaming you, by the way. This is me.
no. This
Okay.
is
Okay.
community. This is fantastic. This is
Okay.
this is
Fair enough.
vulnerability and enthusiasm.
Okay.
This is fucking community, to drop the F-bomb once.
I just want to make sure you're in a safe space and you don't feel threatened. This is my primal instincts. We got to go to Jason's post. I want to make sure we're
Right.
all in the circle of trust.
Hey, I feel safe next to you, so let's
Fair
push
enough.
the boundaries together.
Okay, there you go.
So this wasn't actually yesterday. This was last week. I called you up after listening to both yours and mine. And Charlie, I'm moving through yours. Amazing podcasts on Troy. Not everyone should listen to it. Not to negate that, but Troy launched a new podcast, The Pineapple Perspective, after Sean and this room has been pushing him for 4 years. He did it. We were one of the first guests, which was great. I went back and listened to myself, as I try to do, and I think we all should do, right? And this goes back from the days of performance and whatnot, where you review yourself. Monday morning quarterback, athletes. And I called Sean and I'm like, what you did was absolutely incredible. And I called out a couple different points. And I said, mine was terrible. And I'm scattered and I'm all over the place and I got to get better. And Sean had said to me, when you're in these rooms, you tell stories that everybody loves. I mean, the way you talk and communicate through all these stories and life stories, he's like, and then you get on these podcasts, because what's amazing about Sean is he's going to give the advice and then he's going to listen and he's going to watch and he's going to listen to us on different podcasts and he's going to read our articles and our posts. So it's absolutely amazing to have not just a cheerleader, but a coach in him. And he's like, and then you get on these podcasts and you almost shit the bed, in the sense of, I'm giving these facts and I'm talking through things because I absolutely, love to talk about the experience of what's going on, but I'm losing the story. And he said to me, we want more Rabbi Berkowitz than Jason Berkowitz on these. And that might be alluding to a post from, I'd like to thank my agent, my mom, and my third grade rabbi for making the B list with Shatsy. I don't know. So, which is, the sermons and telling a story of how we learn. I said, okay. And I went on another podcast yesterday and Sean and I talked afterwards. He said, how did it go? I go, oh man, terrible. I was reaching for stories to everything that was an answer. And I had tell more stories on a little piece of paper next to me. But I was stretching for stories and some of them weren't as interesting. And Sean had said to me, it's not about finding a story in the moment. It's about understanding and refining. What are the 3 stories that you have that you can tell that come back to what I'm caring about and pushing and what my business is about? And then tell it over and over again. And he talked to me about how he read in Howard Stern's book of how, and not to give it away in this part, Sean, but to keep going, of how Howard Stern had talked about when he was doing these media promotions and going around, he had realized it's not about the question that he gets, it's about what he wants to say and finding his way there. And we see it in politics and we see it in everything. And the idea is that if we can really work on what are these handful of stories that we feel confident that we can tell them and get better every time we tell them, that shape and share the message that we're looking to communicate, and be open to adapting them and pulling them in and swaying with them, then we're going to be incredible podcast guests. And I've got one coming up in 2 weeks that I'm excited about. And I called up my creative director afterwards. And I told him about the story, about the conversation, and he loved it. And we talk about, the intro is, the first thing is, let me tell you a story. Or as my buddy would say, oh, that reminds me of something. Whatever the intro is for you, find a way to bring it to these handful of stories that you have. So this is the work that I'm going to have. What I'm going to do, and I'm about to land this plane, is over the next week, I'm going to work on 3 to 5, get it down to 3 stories that I feel confident in, shape them and figure out on-ramps to them and what the messages are, and see how I do in 2 weeks from now. Back over to you, Sean.
Magical. Jason Berkowitz, magical. Lessons and stories. It always comes down to lessons and stories. And the more that I've appeared on podcasts, the more that I've interviewed people, we are all in the storytelling business. And to what Jason said about, let me tell you a story, I think think part of the problem, and we work with a lot of different founders from a lot of different tech companies on helping them better craft their message. And one of the things, I'll share a story about Aman Narang, which I absolutely love, who is the co-founder and new CEO of Toast. But I got the opportunity to interview Aman for Restaurant Influencers, which was an absolute huge, incredible journey of us going from our Toast unboxing story to the IPO, to me being on the customer advisory board, to getting invited to a sales kickoff event where I got to bring a media team and interview, sit down with the co-founder to hear the origin story of Toast. But before that call, I met with him and the PR team, and he was prepped as if he was going on an earnings call. So the questions that I was asking, he was giving me answers as if he was doing an earnings call, a corporate CEO. And I asked him very politely, I said, Aman, will you please come back when we do the interview with stories? I want to hear the stories. Tell me about what you were feeling, when you were in the garage, when you were sitting on the couch next to Steve, not sure if this idea of Toast would work. And to Aman's credit, he came back with pages. He had a stack full of flashcards ready to answer the questions, but he didn't come ready to answer the questions. He came with stories. And because he came with stories, it was such a pleasurable interview. And one of the interviews that I've gotten the most feedback on. Obviously, we do a lot of work with Toast. We have a lot of people in our Toast community. But back to the idea of understanding every time someone asks you a question, to the Howard Stern point, if they ask you a question, our natural tendency is to talk about the industry, talk about the things we love, give examples of you should do this or I should do that. Instead of I should or you should, tell me a story. And, to this point is like, I need to even get better at my own advice. I was talking to Jason yesterday about when did I start believing in storytelling? Well, I started believing in storytelling in Alicante, Spain, when I was studying abroad. And my grandfather called me at a payphone. He called me at a payphone. I was sitting next to the Plaza de Toros in this most beautiful place right next to the Mediterranean Sea, studying abroad. And my grandfather said he was getting to the age where he needed help, and I was too far away from him, and he needed help writing his life memoir. And it was at that exact moment where my life changed. And now here I am almost 2 decades later, helping other brands, helping other leaders tell stories. And I don't tell that story enough. And the more that I tell that story, the more that I can articulate why we do what we do, which, to Jason's point, brings home the idea of how do you become a better guest on a podcast. So we're going to open it up. I know we've got a lot of people down below. We would love for you to join us up on stage. We've got a lot of podcast guests. We've got a lot of podcast hosts. If you haven't been a guest or if you haven't been a host, you've definitely been asked to tell your story. So give us any advice. This is repurposed on the Digital Hospitality feed. So we've got some amazing people that will be tuning in and learning from these lessons. Stover, go ahead. Mic is yours.
Yeah, I'm coming to you from the road this time. I'm usually stuck. Everyone, if people, listeners of this show, and also people who join this live event know that I'm usually stuck at home, either with kids or with work. And so right now I'm actually in my car driving safely on the way to Seattle. It's a road trip. I'm going to go pick up the boys in a few minutes. So I'm very excited about this, which is why I'm sharing. I'm not at Disneyland like Troy did one time, but I'm on I-5 almost. I am producer with Cali BBQ Media.
Are you there?
Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Whoa, hold on, I went off a cliff.
That's called a cliffhanger.
I literally went off a cliff, but my car's got a parachute, so I'm all good.
Fair enough.
I don't know where I cut off, but I love being part of this group. I love being part of Cali BBQ Media. I love telling stories, and I'll be listening in on this one mostly. But it's a very exciting time for me, and I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Stover. Appreciate it. And anybody that knows the amount of work that Stover does behind the scenes for Cali BBQ Media, for me, myself, grateful for you. Happy early Father's Day. Drive safely and enjoy the show, the reunion show. Mandy, Mike is yours.
John,
yeah, go ahead.
Quick, I gotta jump off. But
you do. Go ahead. Well,
I just wanted to jump in real quick.
Absolutely.
for those of you who know me, and for those of you who don't, I've owned my own restaurant now for about 3 years. Just got my brick and mortar about a year ago, and my podcast is now a year in. And some of the best advice that I've ever received was, whether it's a podcast interview, news, newspaper, whatever, magazine article, doesn't really matter what it is, but it doesn't matter what the question is. It matters what your answer is. And if you're going to tell a story, then tell your story. Take their question and turn it into the story that you want to tell. You don't always have to be directly answering the questions that are being asked. You can, if you're a business that needs people and you're trying to hire folks, and somebody asks you how things are going, hey, everything's going great. I would love to add another 5 people to my quickly growing team. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to me at 615-307-0120, right? Whatever it may be. But you don't have to always directly answer the question and then stop. You can tell your story inside of their question. And I had a gentleman on my podcast last week who's coming up, who has his own podcast called Relentless Pursuit. And it's amazing when you're on a podcast and you're interviewing someone and you leave the questions open-ended and they tell their story, and you just can kind of guide them and bump them into where they want to go. Sean does an amazing job of that, of doing it ahead of time. And I'm learning how to do it ahead of time and during the show as well. But don't always think that you have to answer the question. It's not always black and white. A lot of times you can answer the question and then elaborate on what you want to say and tell your story inside of the story. That's all I got. I got to go.
That is magic, Charlie. Thank you. Happy Father's Day. Crush it this weekend. We appreciate
Happy Father's Day. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, the magic of what Charlie's talking about is, if it's top of mind for you, it's probably your truth. So that is your story, and that is the thing that's going to stand out in the interview, and that's what people are going to take away. Mandy, please share with us.
Hi.
What have you learned?
Oh gosh, we're gonna be at 100 episodes by July for our Adventures in Business. So we've learned so much. We've interviewed so many awesome guests. And you're right, not everybody is a great podcast guest, and it is a little bit of a work in progress. But I think the common theme is to listen. As a guest, listen. And when I say listen, I mean listen, first of all, before you go on the show, listen just to one of their shows. Like Sean, I'll give you an example. When I was on your show, and this was almost 3 years ago at this point, you do something unique with your format. You did before. I don't know if, I know yours has evolved over time too, is you would ask people to give their 60-second or less pitch. So when I was interviewed on your show, I was prepared with that. Like every show has some sort of format. Like our show, we flip the script towards the end and we invite the guests to ask myself a question and Amani a question, and we say whatever question you want. If you'd never listened to our show, you wouldn't know that. So when you get to that point in the interview, you could be possibly stumped, which is also fine too. Those authentic moments are awesome. But just listen to one episode. If you're a guest, just listen so you understand the format and you can be prepared. And the other thing is, so listen in advance, and then on the show, listen to the question that the host is asking you. I think sometimes we get to this interview and you're so prepared with your talking points that you literally sound like a robot and you're not listening to what the question is, and it messes up the comfortable conversation. And people can hear that. The audience can hear, like, you're not really answering the question, and not only not answering the question, you literally sound like a robot. So, and sometimes those conversations can take a turn that you didn't prepare for. And that is the secret sauce of just being along for the ride and allowing that conversation to take a turn, because it might open up a vulnerability or you might help somebody. So Jason, I thought you were a great guest on our show. You were episode number 25, by the way. I just popped Jason's episode with us on our show. I put that in our digital hospitality leadership Instagram thing. So feel free to give that a listen or a watch. And I think, a story is TJ Void was on our show, And you just talked about, you had just talked a little bit about sermons before. I was so fired up by the great guest that TJ was, because he literally dropped sermons. He dropped sermons about real estate, about generational wealth, about being a parent. We covered all these accidental topics because he was like in it, listening, and then he bounced questions to us, but his stories were more like sermons. So, my thing would be just listen, don't be too robotic, and let the conversation go where it could possibly go, and just let it be organic.
That is awesome.
It's really true what you say about listen to episodes first, right? When we came around on our episode, and I'm going to be better next time, was I was ready to go with questions. I knew that was coming at the end, and I was ready, and I wanted to already be ahead so I can kind of think a little bit out the box and put you on your back heels a bit to have more engagement. So that's a great tip.
And Mandy, congratulations on 100 episodes, by the way.
Yes.
That's a mental achievement. But I do want to remind you that you know what we call 100 episodes at Cali BBQ Media?
What do you mean, what?
It's called episode 1.
Oh, why? Tell me why.
Stover, I thought you were going to say
100's
like
nothing.
for Sean.
When you'll look back at 100 episodes is what I'm telling you as a content creator, and you're going to be like, 100 episodes? That might as well be episode 1.
Yeah, what's funny you say that, because I remember Sean said when you get past the 12th episode, a lot of people quit there. You get past the 25th episode, a lot of people quit there. And we've been, Amani and I have been celebrating each of those as steps, right? 12, 25, 50. And you're right. It does. You learn something new every day. It's an ongoing education. It does.
And that's just, I want everyone making podcasts and content, which almost all of you are at this point, I hope, to remember that exactly that message. It might feel like you're an old hat at that episode 12. There's a long way to go, a lot of content to do. And what is Jason's what is happening, Jason? He's at that hardcore. He's at that hardcore show that I'm heading to.
I was like, it fell in the pocket. I knew that was me. Okay, we're back.
Anyway, congratulations. That's huge. Very huge.
Thank you. I'm glad you say that, though, because it is true. You got to be a student of this and like celebrate your mini wins, but just keep learning. Because like I said, we're still learning every day, and we're going to continue to keep that open mindset.
And another tip, which also goes into asking the host a question, that's a part of Mandy's segment, which obviously, yes, listen to a show before you go on a show. That is great advice. But if you can figure out how to ask the host a question based off of their question that leads into your story, watch some of the best interviewees. That's what they do. They do just a phenomenal job. And there was a guy, Ari Siegel, who's the president of the San Diego Gulls, which was a AHL hockey team. And he just did a masterful job every time he did a media interview of asking the guest a question that led him into the story. So now you have the host hooked. It's a difficult thing to do, but it's a challenge to anybody here that's going on a show. If you've got a great story, if you've refined your story, your why, try to ask a question before you get into your story. Laura, how do you be a better guest on a podcast? Anything that you've learned? How do you be a better interviewee?
Well, I'm absolutely learning from all of you. I've never been a guest on a podcast, and I don't have a podcast. But the closest thing I've experienced is speaking on panels or speaking in front of groups of new hire salespeople at different companies that I've worked for. And I think, a lot of times it's been called street smarts or just interviewing me about a day in the life of how I run my sales day, if you will. But just being completely honest about what works for you. And now after 3 decades of doing this, I have such great pride and confidence in my personal strategy, and it's definitely not what you would learn in a textbook, right? When you start out, it's, they say it's a numbers game and tons of cold calling. Thankfully, through the support of this group and people I've met through all of you, the idea of establishing yourself as an expert and then attracting the business as opposed to chasing it. We talked about that with that quote, don't chase the butterfly, tend your garden and the butterfly will come. And so that's really what I'm working on. But again, I haven't been on a podcast yet. I'd love to be on one, and definitely perfecting my stories to be a good guest.
Well, Laura, we've got great news, and we've got plenty of podcasters here, but you're also a guest currently. Right now, you're a guest on the Digital Hospitality Show. The way that we repurpose the content, but I'm sure that opportunity is coming soon enough, Laura. So thank you for all the contributions you make, and
thank you
for being phenomenal. Michael, you've been going on a lot of shows recently. What have you learned?
Oh, this is great. So what have I learned? A couple things to share there. One, what I try to do in advance of being a guest on in any capacity is look at who the listener is, because one of the things I've learned studying business, biology, sociology, et cetera, over the years is people tend to only listen or hear the things they care about. So what I try to do is listen to a couple of the person's podcasts in advance, and also try to understand who the audience is, so that I'm relevant and helpful to them building their identity as a podcaster, but also that I show up in a way that might help not just the listeners, but myself in the future. So that's one thing. I was, as an example, I was giving a session. I was at a conference over the weekend where there was a session. It's not really a podcast, but it's similar, same as the audience goes. I was speaking with a friend of mine. We did a session on what are monopolies and how are they relevant to auctions, and where does capital structures come into place. Really, sounds like really boring stuff, right? So, and there was 2 days of sessions, and we were the last of 4, and we were after lunch on the last day. So I already had anticipated everyone was going to be bored and tired and sleepy. And they look like that, right? They came in, and my partner, who was co-leading with me, was going into a lot of details, which were super relevant, but I could see people couldn't focus because they were tired. So one of the things I'll try to do in those situations is be sort of strategic comic relief, where I'll come in with a funny version or story that's still relevant to what we're teaching, but kind of wakes people up. And then we'll also work on group sessions where we have people like, well, let's all talk about this together and see where we can figure out some relevance and get the room moving. But it's still fundamentally the same. It's like, how do we keep it relevant to audience? Because you know, everybody has a different background. Everybody listens for things differently. And the challenge I find is, how do we keep it common? Or everybody's probably there for a specific reason. What is it? How can we ask in advance? I always like to go back to one of the coaching programs we brought in and licensed into our companies, the Macklin Connection, and it's very aligned with what you see in Ted Lasso. And so what is that? It's like that line where he says, be curious, not judgmental. And that's the other thing I try to do is be really curious, not assume that I know what everybody in the audience is thinking or wants to be, but find ways to ask questions of the host, or ask questions or answer questions when they're asked of me, so it's relevant. I find those to be like really helpful strategies. That's it.
Very helpful, Michael. And if those of you haven't seen the Ted Lasso episode of Be Curious, Not Judgmental, I couldn't recommend that specific episode more. Just a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. Yeah. Justin Ulrich.
Hey.
Welcome to the stage.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
How do you be a better podcast guest?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done a lot of hosting, right? We've got our 42nd episode coming out. We do weekly episodes this week anyway. So, and so I've had, it was hard for me at the beginning, because it was like, I had the structure and I wanted to make sure we answered specific questions and stuff. And the structure helped us to be able to scale and basically build the podcast without spending too much time and getting down in the weeds with each episode, because we have other stuff we've got to get done. So the structure is great. But following the structure sometimes gets me kind of, it would get me tripped up, and making sure that I ask the questions the same way every time. And it kind of broke up the conversation and the flow and made things seem a little disjointed. So I would say structure is great, but don't kind of pigeonhole yourself into only asking questions in a certain way, which it may sound like a no-duh thing, but that's not what I did at the beginning. I learned a lot just to roll the punches, and eventually you may get to those questions, or answering the question without even having to ask it. But which I had Michael on a show a couple weeks ago. We recorded one, and I didn't even really have to ask any of the questions, because he was already getting to the things that I was going to say. So that also could speak to doing your research before, attending someone's podcast and knowing the types of things that they're going to ask. The other piece for me is just, Sean, you mentioned, you kind of hinted at this with the example of the CEO of Toast, but it's like, be your authentic self. Don't worry about, portraying yourself like you're going in front of the board, or you're doing some big, you're speaking on the stock or whatever. Like, be your authentic self, laugh, have a good time, be human, and try to uncover things about your guests that are also human, because people listen in because they want to figure out new things they want to figure out new insights, new perspectives, new things about the folks that you've brought on, because they're interested in that guest. The guest is a draw to bring people to your podcast. So make sure that you keep the conversation interesting by touching on things that they may otherwise never find out about those people.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. And special shout out to Dean LeBay. Dean LeBay, birthday boy. You want to tell us?
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Sorry I'm late, guys.
You never apologize for being late. You're always here. You're a man of consistency.
I was going to say, the way we're talking about you, it's like you're here. Because happy birthday.
Well, I knew Jason, we're not going to go into it right now. I love you so much. Podcast, I've been on a couple, but I want to start one. I wanted to say first to Laura, I don't see our boy here, but he normally says, Troy, he normally says, be the magnet, not the billboard. And I think that's kind of what you were saying, having people drawn to you and whatever. And I appreciate what Michael said. I understand what he's saying, and Justin too. For me, I've been on a couple of podcasts, and the ones that I went to, they ask about the potato. So that's how I want to know what your potato theory is, or as Sean would say, your orange tree story. I want to know what that aha moment was for you, and I want to know why you asked me to come on it. But then I want to know more about that. And for me, that's what I get out of it. We all have aha moments. We have them all the time. It's just that we're not to be alive. To be aware is to be alive. We're just not aware of it because we get caught up in life. We get caught up in things that happen. We get caught up in problems, and we get caught up in just BS. But the bottom line is they happen around us all the time. Father's Day is coming on Sunday. That's the biggest aha moment you have in life, those children that you have. So anyway, that's all I got. Thanks.
Dean, let me jump in here real quick. So where can I find your potato story to hear it? Dean?
Mic drop.
Oh, it's right here. I was on Don. I'll send you the link. I was on Don.
Send it to me.
I will. And then I was on Nick's podcast. So yeah, I'll send it to you.
I'd love to hear it. And then you also shared a pecan story, didn't you, with this group?
A pecan story? Yeah. I years ago, I was selling paper clips for a living, and talked to a girl up in Whiteville, North Carolina. Her name was Lynette, and she was a bookkeeper, and I sold her a lot of office supplies over the telephone. And anyway, I called one day. She said, Dean, I don't want to talk to you today. I said, what's wrong, Lynette? She said, well, we sell pecans up here. I said, well, okay. I said, what's the problem? She said, well, everything on this side of the Mississippi River dried up. We ain't got no pecans. I said, well, how much do you want to buy? She said, I want to buy as many as I can. I said, well, what are you willing to pay? She said, 98 cents a pound. I said, okay, let me call you back. She said, don't worry about it. She says, you can't do nothing about it. Well, I knew a guy up in Texarkana that sold pecans. He called her, and he sold her 2 tractor trailer loads full at 68 cents a pound. I could have told him what she'd pay, but I told him that she needed a good deal. She was having a hard time, and he honored that. Well, a couple of weeks later, she sent me a telephone book with all the. Now, this is, guys, I know I'm older now, but this is back when they had the yellow pages, and they had people's names in the phone book, and you could circle them and call their phone number. Anyway, she sent me a phone book with all these businesses circled with a handwritten note that said, Dean, I appreciate you so much. Said these people are expecting your phone call, and she sent me a $500 check. So anyway, that's the pecan story. Thanks.
Thank you. And if that isn't, be the magnet story, I don't know what is. So thanks so much, Dean. Happy birthday.
That's beautiful.
Stop
Dean.
making me cry.
That's beautiful, Dean. We need more of the pecan story for sure. Sepida, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, Sapita.
Sepida, welcome to the stage. Can you take 60 seconds
Thank
and
you.
let the community know who are you and what do you do?
Yes, I apologize for the background. I am driving and I pulled over because this topic is so good and I wanted to share my story. So sorry about the car noise. And I also wanted to say thank you to Mandy for inviting me. This is so good. So I have spoken on different platforms, stages, podcasts, and one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, it was just understanding and learning how much I was judging my own story, and just understanding that how my story can be rich and impactful when I'm living in my own authentic self. So my background, I'm Iranian, born and raised, and every time people were asking about my background, that was a part that I was just not really exposing, because in my mind, what I was thinking, maybe that's not relatable to people to understand where I'm coming from. And when I started being like vulnerable and sharing my story, that how this migration impacted me, the choices that I've made in my life to come and be where I am today, it just opened up a different way of being with the audience, and how many people they walked up to me. And, this lady said, oh my God, I adopted someone from Iran, and there's so many things that I don't know how to connect with her. And she connected with me, and I'm helping her to raise her child. So this is really big for me, like sharing our stories, being authentic, and understanding the personality of the hosts also. Necessarily what we think is relatable doesn't mean that it's the audience are not there to listen. We never know who we're touching, who's listening, and how we can impact them. So this is definitely a learning in my journey, and I'm so excited to be on Mandy's podcast next week on Monday. Thank you.
Sepida, thank you so much for joining us. Mandy, thank you for referring Sepida. I hope you continue to join us in this community every Wednesday, every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific time on LinkedIn or wherever you are in the world. We are so grateful to have new voices up here on stage with us. Thank you so much for coming up and sharing your story. Phyllis Williams Strotter in the house. It's been too long, Phyllis.
Hey, honey. You talk about podcasts.
How do you be a better guest on a podcast? What
oh my God.
Give us a story. Give us a lesson.
Go back and listen to the bad ones you did. Sean, I went back and listened to the last podcast we did together. I said, I fucking never shut up. Oh my God. I felt like I talked so much. It's like, but Sean told me, he's like, bring the real grandma. And I when I was listening, I heard you ask me a question. I was like, I didn't even answer the fucking question. It just flew right past me. But anyway, one of the things that I do know is that when you're going on someone else's show, even though you're being interviewed, it's still their show. And as much as I try to rein in all my crazy, sometimes it gets away from me. But I still try and respect that, you know what, it's not really about me. They're trying to bring something to their audience. And so making sure that the things that you do offer make them look good. And that is you did. But like I say, a lot of people have said, listen to the episodes and so forth. Don't go on a show just to hype your latest thing, your launch, yourself. Make sure that it ties in with what they want to bring to their audience, because they've already have a captive audience for you. So just be respectful. So that's my thing.
That's great advice. Thank you, Phyllis. Jordan Silverman, mic is yours. How do you be a better guest on a show?
First off, what people are saying here is awesome. I'm not even kidding. I've literally been taking notes on what people are saying. So I don't know what that says about me also. So what I try to do before a podcast is very similar to what Mandy said, is I try to always listen to a few episodes ahead of my recording to make sure I understand, are there any questions they ask every time? I used to script everything out, and the podcast came out terribly. Like, I literally just sounded like a robot who was reading from a script, and they were awful. So now what I try to do is A, listen to some podcasts ahead of time, and then B, just write down 1 or 2 points that I want to make sure I hit on at some point throughout the podcast that I think will resonate with the audience and yield good results. Nothing more than 1 or 2 points. So that's what I'm trying to do. I've been fortunate to be on a good amount of podcasts recently, and I listened to some of them, just like, shit, that sucked. And then some I'm like, oh, like that was actually pretty good. So I think just A, going as prepared as possible, but not over prepared. And then B, as cringe as it is to listen to you talk for 45 minutes, listen back to the podcast after it's been recorded and take some notes on what you like and don't like so you can get better for the next one.
A back office story?
Like, you mean like me helping someone record a podcast?
No, like a back office, like how you built your company. Like, every time I think about what you do, like, one of the things I've always hated about restaurants is the manager office. Like this little tiny shitty closet that a manager is supposed to go and do payroll and do all the things that they're like. Everything I want is to be mobile, and I want managers spending more time with their guests. And, you know, part of the digital hospitality solutions is the incredible technology brains that figure out how to let people be more hospitable using tech tools. So I'm just trying to think if there's any customers that you've helped or anything that you can lean in on as a pillar story when you go on shows.
I love that. That's it's a really good call and an idea, because I'll never forget, like when I first got into the restaurant tech industry, I went to one of our customers in New York City, and he like took me on a tour of the whole restaurant. Then we get down to his office, and like it was just a broom closet with a computer in it, and he could not have been prouder of that broom closet with a computer in it. And like that's where he spent 10 hours a day every single day, because that's where he was forced to. So Sean, I need to think about a good one there, but I love that idea.
Yeah, find more of those pillar stories and incorporate those into the points that you want to make. Will be
great call out. Thank you.
Powerful. That's what I'm here to do. Just ask Jason Berkowitz.
First one in the pool.
Appreciate you. Let's see. I got my order all mixed up. Michelle, welcome to the stage. Let us know any tips, any stories, any lessons you have about being a better guest.
Hey, what's up, everyone? It's me, Michelle. It's so funny that my tip is actually kind of piggybacks off of Mandy's, but it's perfectly synchronized, because what I was going to say is that when you listen to when you're going on a podcast and you do listen to other people's podcasts, what I have found, I always find some like interesting personal stuff, something about their personal or just something that's going on in their lives that's like that when we get to that conversation or we get on the podcast, whether I'm a guest or if I'm interviewing someone, that it's just some incredible synchronicity that just brings a special magic to the conversation. And it's so funny that you just talked about the broom closet at the restaurant, because I've been so busy, I haven't been able to be on the calls, but I actually got promoted to like a shift lead here at Lola Rose's. I'm helping, support the management. And today's my first day, and I'm literally in the little broom closet, the broom closet office. So I just think it's just an amazing, that's just how that ties in, so really listening and then going back and listening to other episodes, it just brings a special magic and you can have a conversation that you couldn't have had before when you do that. So I just really love that. The only other thing I would add is that a lot of times people are they're broadcasting their episodes in a lot of different spaces, and me being an extra kind of creative genius, as I like to think, I have made the mistake before of playing a video, Michael Jackson's Can You Feel It, like just to punch in the point I was trying to make, and that the copyright systems did not like that too well, and it really was not a good plan. So that's just something you definitely want to think about if you are going on somebody else's podcast. If you are wanting to do something a little special, you want to make sure that you have copyright. What am I trying to say? That you have music that does not require a copyright, because you never know where they're going to broadcast that episode. So that's what I have, and I'm happy to be here with you all today. Thank you so much.
Tips. Welcome back. Congratulations. That is amazing news, and a really good point about the personal information on the host. And one of the challenges that I would challenge everybody in the room or anyone that's listening to this is try to keep all of that gold, all of those personal conversations, the things that you want to tell the host, you're really excited to be on the show, how you first heard about the show, leave it for when it's recording. It's so much better. And that's one of the things I try to do as a podcast guest is I don't want any back and forth chit chat on Zoom before we get going, because that's usually when the magic happens.
1000%.
So as quick as you can get to the interview, get through there shouldn't even be any pleasantry. The sooner that you can get recording and get into the episode, the better the conversation will be, both for you as a podcast host and you as a guest.
Sean, that is David Letterman's interview strategy. I just was listening to this last year, and people have said when they go on a show, it's really weird. He doesn't peek in and say hi before. He won't have a conversation with you before because he wants to save it all for the show.
Yep.
And keep it authentic.
It makes perfect. The more that we do it, the more we realize how much sense it makes, because all of that back room, green room type of stuff, that's what the audience wants to see. That gives the context to the story of why the guest is on the show. Chris, welcome to the stage. What's up?
How are you?
You got any advice on how to be a better guest, or how to tell a better story?
Yeah, it kind of ties in with a lot of what everybody else is saying, but I kind of want to expound on it a little bit more. When you're talking about preparation for a show that you're going on to, right? You have to listen to previous episodes so you can get a feel for the podcast rhythm or the cadence. Everybody interviews differently. The audience is going to be different, and try to match your energy with that of your host so that you can get kind of like what Michelle was saying, get a better feel for the audience and make sure that you're contributing to that podcast as well. So obviously you're on there to tell your story. You're there to connect with the audience. You're there to connect with the host. And you want to make sure that you're doing that in the best way possible so that your message is heard and that people understand that you're a respectful guest and that you're going to come on there prepared in a professional manner so that people understand, hey, this is someone that we want to do business with. So some podcast hosts are very energetic. They want the riff. They want to go back and forth. They want everything to be kind of right off the bat and hit you with random questions like what's your favorite color and things that aren't really relevant, but it gets you talking. And then some podcast hosts are just very concise, direct to the point. And if you're not prepared and you walk into something and you're expecting it to be lighthearted and fun and funny, and it becomes this very answer everything in 3 words or less, and let's try to get to the point and get our message across and hear something from our host or our listeners, right? So preparation. That's really all I can say, and just making sure that you're walking in not blind to wherever you're going to go get interviewed at.
Great.
That's pretty much it.
In that preparation vein, is finding out the why. Why are you on the show? Why did they ask you to come on the show?
100%. 100%.
Great stuff. Elizabeth, you got any tips, advice? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for helping this digital hospitality room get repurposed and published so everyone is a guest. Thank you.
Exactly. You guys are all great guests today. Congratulations. Shout out to my husband for letting me hack his LinkedIn account. So if you see James Doss in the
thank you, James.
He's not actually here.
Even better. Thank you, James.
but we laugh every time you shout him out. No, so a couple things about podcasts side of things. For me, it's having that balance of the technical things that maybe you're sharing, between like having sharing the strategy of what you're there to talk about, but then also infusing story and analogy with it. And even if you don't necessarily have your own personal story that fits the context, looking up a current news article or a trend or something that's going on so that you have a commentary about said thing. So I can talk about when people have had me on their podcasts and I've talked about different ways to use GIFs. I always try to give a tool, like give them maybe something they didn't know that they could do with the GIFs, but I'm also going to talk about personal experience with clients that I've worked with, how they're using them. But then I'll talk about industry leaders that are using it, like the NFL or Hallmark Greeting Channel, movie channel or whatever. And so how can you think on all different levels, not just your own personal stuff. So that was one tip. But the other one is something like that Christopher just touched on, and that is so Mandy and I kind of had this because I was able to be on her show with Amani, and I think Tim was his co-host that day. But Mandy is the one that knows about the gifts, and we've worked together and all these things, and she wasn't going to be able to be there. And I had been on a podcast a year or so before where the person was assigned the podcast for this business. This woman had no idea what I did. Like, she had no context. They gave her no context for what I was doing. So a lot of our conversation was me just trying to explain to her like what, and she was from another country, and so it was like a whole hot mess. So when Mandy told me she wasn't going to be there, I panicked a little. And so, because I said, if someone's being assigned our conversation, I would rather us either wait for when you're available or that there is knowledge. And I didn't know how much she and Amani had already talked about it and how excited he was. So excited, in fact, that after the call, he ended up working with me, and I'm working on his gifts now, which is amazing. But I just wanted to say, like, make sure, just double check on a couple of things. And my last tip is having your media kit ready. So a good photo, your website, or a link to the book that you're talking about, or having those things already ready and sent to the producer so they can add them to the show notes. And also, even it might invite questions about the book that you've written, or the course that you offer, or the services that you offer, because you want to think about what's the call to action at the end of this conversation, so it doesn't just like, oh, well, it was nice knowing you, it was nice talking to you, and then just signing off. Anyway, so those are a couple of my tips. I'll hand it to you, Sean.
Great advice. And that brings up, for those that don't know, like, what we do at Cali Barbecue Media for all of our shows is we do long form content. So anywhere between a 15-minute interview to an hour and 15 minutes for all the shows that we produce. But from every long form conversation, we get 3 takeaways. So our team is combing through the content for the 3 truths. What are the 3 things that the guest got the most excited about? What are the takeaways? What are the lessons? If someone's not going to listen to this long form conversation on Spotify, what's going to make them a better person, or make them more curious about the guest, or more curious about the conversation if they see it as an Instagram story, if they see the post written on entrepreneur.com? What are those things? And if you can think about those truths, and like we always say, think about the stories that lead to the lessons, that will hopefully help you on your next podcast guest appearance. Amazing conversation. Let's go ahead and do tip, takeaway, homework assignment. Stover, are you driving? Are you able? If not, I will go to Elizabeth. Stover, drive safely. Happy Father's Day. Elizabeth, go ahead. Tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
So mine is, I'm going to do a homework assignment of, there have been several podcasts that I've been on that I did not promote to my own community. And I know this is huge for Sean, is to plan, produce, publish, and promote. And so if any of you have been on a podcast, including this one, the Digital Hospitality, where you have spoken on the stage and we've recorded it and put it out there, go and grab the links from those podcasts and reshare them with your community, because you may have new followers that would love to be able to listen in just that way. So I'll hand it back to you, Sean.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And shameless plug for me, I did my homework that I said I would do on Wednesday, which is updating my Medium article about never meeting my birth father. I shared that on LinkedIn. For those of you that have read it, I appreciate that. And just holding myself accountable to this community. You never know. The last time that I published that article was back, I guess, in 2018. I probably resurfaced it a couple Father's Days ago, but as life changes, blogs get updated, content gets updated, and you never know who's watching. Jason Berkowitz, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Homework assignment for myself is working on those 3 to 5 to carve it down to 3 stories, including the orientation story of why I am doing what I do today.
The Rabbi Jason.
Rabbi Berkowitz in the house.
Rabbi Berkowitz. And can we get some funeral home hospitality? Can we get a pillar funeral home? Actually, I need to ask the community. Does anyone know Jason's background in funeral homes? This is open to anybody on the stage.
No.
No? Phyllis?
I am the...
Phyllis? No?
No, and he was
Mandy?
on my podcast. I know about the Jewish mother.
I know.
Gay Jewish mother. Gay
I
Jewish
know
mother.
about the Jewish mother.
Phyllis called me out on that one. It was great.
I think Jason talked about his funeral. Jason, that was in Ohio, right?
Yeah.
I think he talked about it actually on our podcast. I just can't remember what. I just remember Funeral Ohio when he said that.
I am the 4th generation funeral director's son. Our family started the funeral home back in 1918 in Cleveland, Ohio. And what was great or not, it's a small community, but we do 96% of the Jewish funerals in Cleveland, the family does. And I remember at a young age telling my father when the car was semi-dirty and going to go out, and it was raining, and one of the employees was like, it doesn't matter that it's dirty. Like, it was like the limousine going out to pick up the family. It doesn't matter that it's dirty. It's literally raining. And my father lost it and was like, no one gets to see what we do in the background. They need to trust us. So if that second the garage door opens, it doesn't look perfect, what they can see in that moment, how can they trust us with the things they don't see? And he turned to me and I had said something, a young punk, I was 16, about, we have a monopoly in this town. And he's like, let me show you how quickly 4% goes to 5%, goes to 6%. Immediately, we will lose the family name and tradition so fast if we don't pay attention to every little detail. And Sean, that's a new story for you, but that's a lot of where my hospitality and attention to detail came from.
That is a magical story that only you are the only person on earth that can tell. And
yeah, I don't have a hard stop if you want to keep going.
we need some we're gonna have our own episode, a full episode of Let's Go Back Through Jason's Life to the Funeral Home.
Was that or was that Justin telling me to land the plane because Sean was and Troy's not around?
No, I think that was all out of love. I think Justin definitely. I mean, I could poll. I wish I had a poll feature, but I'm pretty sure every single person wants more funeral home Jason hospitality, learning in the funeral home.
Well, here's what's great. We'll wrap it up now, but as we tell our stories that we're doing for homework and we practice with each other, I'll make sure to pull another one out as an origin story.
Well, there's, as you and I discussed on our call yesterday, there's nothing more beautiful than being a business that helps people in the most tragic, difficult times when they lose a loved one. So
you said hospitality in death, which was a
hospitality
great
in death. Yes.
Phrase.
That's a deeper thread. I can't wait to hear more, Jason. Mandy Graziano, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
I think I have 2 takeaways. The first one was what Seppi said about stop judging your own story and own your story. I love that. That really resonated with me. And then I think the second thing is just as somebody that interviews people all the time, this conversation was just a really good reminder of how being a podcast guest can be difficult and it can be nerve-wracking, and not people know they need to do it, but they may not always want to do it. So it just is a good reminder to me to disarm the guests, make them feel comfortable, and get them in their best possible place to bring their best self out. So I really appreciated this conversation today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandy. Laura, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Couple takeaways. Jason, your other story about the way your dad responded to someone who was very upset and taking it out on him, and his words to you about that were also really touching and really memorable. So I think you have an entire, kind of theme or series on lessons from a fourth generation son of a funeral home director, right? And I too will be working on my top 3 to 5 stories. Thank you for that advice. Over this past hour, I've already outlined about 7 stories, and I'll just be practicing tightening them up. So I'm ready for my first podcast debut.
Just remember, Laura, that no matter how many times you tell those 7 stories, you can always tell them better the next time.
Right.
And somebody new might be listening.
And I love this community for the chance to practice those stories. So thank you all.
Of course. Thank you. Justin, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
I just find new opportunities to, when I'm trying to teach my kids lessons, actually do it with a story, because a lot of times it just comes across as you're telling them what to do without getting them to buy into the why behind, why anything is important that you're trying to teach them. So yeah, that's one thing I'm going to try to do this weekend.
That is such a great reminder. Thank you, Justin. If I can't explain it to my 7-year-old son and my 5-year-old daughter in a story, then I'm not doing a good job, and I need to do a better job. Great reminder. Thank you, Justin. Phyllis, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Don't be afraid, especially when you're someone like me who talks a lot. Like Neil always tells me, just take the fucking horn out your mouth. But don't be afraid to do somebody else's podcast.
There it is. And Michelle, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Thank you. I liked Jason's recommendation of just having a few really tight stories that you can tell, and kind of like you can make them bigger, you can make them smaller, you can, draw upon them in different ways. I really do like that idea. So that is something that I'm going to work on. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And thank you, James, Helen, Mark, Simon, Mercedes. We see you, and anybody that joined the room. If you're listening in a car, if you're listening wherever you're listening to this, we would love for you to join us on stage on LinkedIn Live every Wednesday, every Friday. Follow Callie, BBQ Media. We appreciate you. Stay curious, get involved. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And we hope everybody has an awesome weekend, an awesome Father's Day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you all so much. Jason, Elizabeth, Mandy, Laura, Justin, Phyllis, Michelle. Thank you.